In the Cameroonian city of Kumba, at the Mother Francisca International Bilingual Academy, grim scenes of a massacre. A classroom covered in blood, following Saturday's deadly attack. This student survived.
People were crying. People were shouting. By then, I never knew that they were killing people here. So after they are done, they ran away. Before, when we were running away, I saw dead bodies lying here, some lying unconscious.
Several students were killed and a dozen more wounded when attackers armed with guns and machetes stormed the school. When this parent heard about the news, she ran to find her daughter. She was alive, but injured and bleeding.
When I ran in there and I met my child, she was helpless and she was shouting, "Mom, please help me." And I told him, "It is only your God that can save you now. I'm just your mother, but it is only God that can save you because it is God that gave you to me."
The city of Kumba is in Cameroon's southwestern English-speaking region. It remains unclear whether the killings were linked to the ongoing violence between Anglophone separatists and Francophone government forces. Since the conflict erupted in 2017, separatist militants have forced schools to close, often through violence, as part of their boycott against the central Francophone government. The separatists allege discrimination against the English-speaking minority. The fighting has claimed thousands of lives and displaced more than 500,000 people.
Hello everyone, my name is Vikran Mitev and I'm project coordinator of Young Caritas. It's a project empowering youth to be volunteers and creating a volunteering platform here in Bulgaria, in Sofia. And during my work for Caritas Sofia, I was introduced to Paul Tuka, who is from Cameroon, and he's seeking help and looking forward to find ways to make the situation in Cameroon, where he's coming from, better. And this is why we started talking to each other and starting different conversations and looking for ways how to improve the situation there. And this is how we met Dr. Cheryl Simmons. We included her and she thankfully agreed to be part of these conversations and to step in. So Mr. Paul Tuka, he's founder and director of his own organization, Global Torch in Cameroon. And he's working mostly with children and orphanages in the country. And through the means of photography, he's presenting cases of those children and trying to make a global statement and a call for action through the cases he's presenting. So now he's here and he can share more about his country and the problems that they need there. And we'll try to find ways to think how the situation there could be improved.
Good morning, Mr. Tuka, and thank you and my wonderful friend in Bulgaria, Mr. Vikran, for joining us this morning. And I have a tiny little correction to make. Mr. Vikran didn't meet me during this conversation. He actually met me when he was here in the United States at the University of Michigan. Now, Mr. Vikran, I did go to Michigan State, so it's okay that you were at the University of Michigan. But so on this snowy morning in Michigan, we certainly wanted to have some conversation today about the crisis that's taking place in Cameroon. So excited to have Mr. Paul Tuka here to have a more in-depth conversation. And our conversations take place because we use them as training tools for our young people. And that's so important now because we don't have the ability to travel because of the pandemic, but that doesn't mean that we don't still have the ability to learn. So thank you, Mr. Tuka, because you definitely are a part of the learning process for our young people, not only here in the United States, but as Youth for Global Health continues its reach to more than 11 countries. So thank you so much. And I want to get right into the first question that I have for you. And this question is mainly to help provide a political backdrop to the crisis there in Cameroon. Now, the country has a multi-party system of government, but the president retains the power to control legislation. Is that contradictory to a multi-party system?
Yes, Doctor, thank you. I'm happy to meet you on this platform. And I'm happy to answer any question that you are going to ask me. Yes, like you said, Cameroon has a multi-party system, and first and foremost, Cameroon got her independence in 1961 and operated a federal system which comprises of two territories that were trusted to the United Nations. And that was British Southern Cameroon, and then the French Cameroon. And then in 1972, the federal state was abolished or dissolved in favor of the United Republic of Cameroon, which again in the 80s was tactically dissolved without consulting the parties. And then it became the United Republic of Cameroon, which we have today. And I remember in the 90s, there was an all Anglophone conference that was held in Buea, calling on a return to the federal system of 1961, which did not materialize. And from that time, the Southern Cameroonians, the English-speaking Cameroonians, began talking about marginalization, talking about being exploited, talking about assimilation, and that happened to be the immediate cause of the conflict today in Cameroon. And then from the 90s, there was an introduction of the multi-party system, which Southern Cameroonians embraced happily because they thought it was going to be an opportunity, an opinion, or a ground platform for them to be able to express themselves and then vote the people they need to power so they could represent them. And then with the system in place, which seems to be a dictatorial system, this has failed, with the present president remaining positioning himself to power for close to about is getting to 38 years, soon it will be 40. So Cameroonians got fed up and they are tired. So the overwhelming, I would call it, return to one system which the president has gotten through manipulation and enabling a system in place called the Anglophone crisis, has given him room to get to power because the Anglophones who thought they could be able to vote their representatives, and they embraced the Social Democratic Front, which was a party that was led by Nejon Frundi, who was an Anglophone. Because of the crisis, the government in place used the opportunity to destroy that party. During elections, the Anglophones could not go out to vote. And then shooting intensified, and people ran out of the region to the Francophone regions. And when they got there, the government said, no, if you were internally displaced, you could not vote. And that happened to have given a lead to the government in place.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tuka, for that response. And my next question is, the outline of the conflict there in Cameroon are less defined than one might think. Can you summarize the core of what the conflict is?
Yeah, the conflict is all about failing to respect the 1961 Constitution, and it is where we have the root causes. And to be able to summarize this, I will for short, not going too far, will want to say that we need to go back to the Constitution of 1961 and address the root causes from there. And that is exactly what Cameroon had as a solution, because every other solution has failed. Every time, whatever decision to bring Anglophones to decentralization, whether centralization, unitary state, or what has failed. And I think that the best thing to do, we go back to 1961 and then bring up the federal system, and it will work because it worked in the days of Amadou Ahidjo, the first president. And if it's failing today, it's because we fail to respect it. These are people with two different identities, two different cultures. If you try to mix them, bring them together and merge them, assimilate them, and it's not working, then let's go back to 1961 and handle this as a federal system where everybody's opinion is equal, where people are not marginalized, where Anglophones have a say, where Anglophones will take their decisions as it was the case in the House of Assembly in Buea, and then they moved to Yaoundé to meet the central government. They discuss issues together and take decisions. And I think this is what was supposed to have been done. If this was done, this situation would have not escalated to where we are today.
Mr. Tuka, my question is, why is the African Union not more involved in this particular conflict?
Yeah, Doctor, that's an interesting question. It's talking about the African Union is a difficult thing to talk about because since I discovered, I grew up, I've not seen African Union playing a good role in conflict management in Africa. Talk less of managing the situation in Cameroon. Why am I saying so? Most African leaders are leaders who promote dictatorship, promote people to get to power and stay and oppress others. In such a system, they will not be able to come together as one body and then solve the problem in Cameroon. It is failed because Cameroon happens to be a country which is considered Francophonie. But then the unfortunate situation to Anglophone Cameroon is they happen to belong to the system where they are not being considered as part of the Commonwealth, which I would call it that way. Why? Because they want France to do something, but France wants to benefit from Cameroon, and they have done that in all African countries that they colonize, Cameroon being one of them. They will not allow even the African nations to come in. And if African nations union comes in, they will not still be able to do it because they themselves are guilty of their system. They have not made a system clear whereby you open your eyes and then tell the next colleague of yours what you're doing is not right. Creating platforms for good democracy, creating platforms for good governance is a failure in Africa. And this is the reason why African Union has kept silent. They have not said anything. We thought they could make a move. There are particular countries that try to talk about the Anglophone ongoing crisis, but it's not the African Union. And I think that if this is not addressed in another way, if the world wants to look at African Union, Cameroonians, Anglophone Cameroonians will die. Cameroon will go down the drain. Cameroon will go down the pit because African Union has remained dormant the way they do their things. And I don't look at it to be a way out of Anglophone crisis if we want to rely on African Union. I think so.
Tuka, can you now talk a little bit about the school closings there in Cameroon amidst the violence that's taking place?
Yeah, the school situation in Cameroon is a nightmare to Anglophone Cameroonians. Since when this conflict started, children stayed out of school because on their way to school was a problem. And if they attend school was a problem. And then at the end of the day, the schools were completely shut down. We are not just talking about children who are not going to school and schools that are shut down. We are also looking at schools that are burned down. We are looking at schools that are destroyed. And then at this point, it is difficult for children who are in the midst of an ongoing conflict to go to school. Schools that are able to operate under the supervision and control of the military are in cities. You talk of a school in Buea, you talk of a school in Bamenda City, yes, fine. You talk of a school in Limbe, Victoria, fine. But then talking about a school in a typical village where the separatist fighters have taken total control is not possible. And for 4 years, children have not gone to school. Most of these children have grown big and many of them have gone pregnant. Some are into trade. And then what trade will a child have? If you send a child to do carpentry, you send a child to do building construction without basic education, that child will not make it. And that is what is happening here. So it is not safe with schools here. It's not safe with children going to school. So absolutely, these schools are closed down. And until these crises are finished, we will not talk about effective resumption and normal resumption to school by the children here in the Anglophone speaking part of Cameroon. So this is a nightmare. It's a nightmare, doctor. I won't blink my eyes to tell you this. You must have seen, if you get to the field, you get to ground zero, you will understand that the separatist fighters are in control. Not only school, hospitals are involved. Access to medication, access to potable water, access to electricity, everything has failed. So we are in a very dangerous situation here in Cameroon. And I regret saying it, but the truth is we are concerned about the future of these kids. Majority of them have gone out of their villages to neighboring towns, to the West Province, which is Bafoussam, to Littoral, which is Douala, to Yaoundé, but they are faced with horrible conditions. Majority have become prostitutes. Majority have become hawkers. How long are we going to continue in this same situation? What a future without the youth. What a future without children going to school. What will be power without the young generation? And that is my cry. That is where I am looking at. As a humanitarian, that is my more concern. Let children go to school. Let they fight for power, fight for self-interest, but allow the children to gain access to school so that their future will also be important to the country and to those that will be looking up to them. It's a horrible situation, and I will not, I'm not happy talking about it. From what I see on ground, it's a horrible situation.
Mr. Tuka, can you, we certainly are living, in the world of COVID-19 now. It seems to be driving most of our lives. Can you talk a little bit about how COVID-19 is affecting things there in Cameroon?
Yeah, that's another issue that has carried the day and is the news everywhere. In Cameroon, COVID is a situation that is coming to make a situation worse, because we were confused and we doubted how the future will look like in the midst of a crisis that is still ongoing and there is no solution. And then COVID-19 came and made things worse, because the people who were unable to survive and make ends meet are faced with COVID-19, which has closed down the little economy we had. In Cameroon, we struggle with it, but then in a situation where everybody needs to go out and look for what to get to come home to feed a family. But if at the end of the day, the shutdown restrictions are making it more difficult for people to get to marketplaces, to move from one town to the other, to be able to get to deal with their businesses, is a problem. It has affected this country, and the impact of the crisis we are feeling is too bad, because the economy of Cameroon had fallen before COVID-19. COVID had made it worse than it was. So presently, as I'm talking, the figures are rising, but not as much as one could say, because the measures in place are reported. The results, the statistics are difficult to get. Times everything is politicized here in Cameroon. They make it look like it's a situation whereby people make money, and that is not the case, because when you look at basic needs like water, which if we don't have vaccines, if we don't have other means of survival or means to protect, we could even just use the basic and the simple measures which WHO gave, which is constant washing of hands. And then we are faced with water crisis. If you are faced with water crisis and you are regularly supposed to clean your hands as a means of protecting yourself from being contaminated, then how do you do it? So these are problems. We face with power failure. We have electricity problem. And then the people survive from making water out of boreholes. And to operate a borehole, you need to have a system that operates with electricity, with power. And if power is failing, how are you going to do it? So those are the challenges we have. If COVID-19 has come to stay, then the situation in Cameroon is going to be worse than what we are talking about, because we are dealing with two serious crises. The ongoing crisis, which is the conflict, and then COVID has come in to make it worse than anything. So at one point, we don't know whether to begin to face the ongoing crisis which had been in place, or to be fighting COVID-19. So it's a double problem. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tukran. My final question to you is, we see that nearly 60,000 Cameroonians, a large number of which are children, are migrating to Nigeria to escape the violence. Now, can you tell us what you see as a future is for these children that are now migrating, some with and some without families, to Nigeria? What's the future look like for them?
That is a situation that bothers me a lot, because when you look at what is happening, if children move into a foreign country, a country where they are not used to it, a country where nobody knows them, children for that matter, then it's a horrible situation. Why am I saying this? If these children who are there have access to education, fine, but we are not sure, and there is no education going on, and we don't know when they will return to Cameroon. So the answer is simple. The future is blind. The future of these children is dealt with. The future is tempered with. And if at the end of it, we are not coming back to compensate them, because time does not wait for somebody to handle such issues when a child's future is dealt with. When most of them, because of struggling to survive, get into trafficking, get into what you call prostitution, the end result is they bring out more children. And who is going to be responsible? We are not happy to see children go out of their own country to another country. The situation of living there is not good. So my problem and my desire is to see peace return, and I see these children come back to their country, so that they will be able to make their lives here as Cameroonians. They were not born Nigerians. It's an abuse to human rights. These children need to live back here. And the earlier we end this crisis, the better, so that these children can return to Cameroon, because in Nigeria, to be frank with you, they don't have a future. They are not happy where they are. They find the land strange. It's a strange land. For how long are they going to be there? It's a question they are asking us. And it's our responsibility here back in Cameroon to make sure that these children return and live as Cameroonians. It's a right to live in your nation. It's a right to live in your nation. It's a right to be protected. It's a right to feel what you want. It's a right to love. This is not what we think should be the situation. And I think that, and I repeatedly say it, as long as they live out there, we have contributed to destroy their futures. And there is absolutely no future as far as they continue to live as refugees. That is my stand.
Okay, this conversation today has been certainly more than enlightening, and I cannot say thank you enough to my wonderful friend Vic Ron for facilitating this, connecting with Mr. Tukwa and making this happen. So as we close, I'm going to ask for some closing remarks from both of you, and I'm going to start with you, Vic Ron. And just some closing remarks about the plight of children, because I know that that is what we're talking about today. You know, how do you see us advocating for children that are going through this kind of atrocity? And, you know, we speak from a global perspective. So not only the children there in Cameroon, but, you know, around the world as we continue to lift our voice. Can you give us some closing remarks on just the plight of children that are marginalized, parts, you know, children that are living in poverty and under horrific conditions? And I do not omit, you know, how our immigration department has handled, you know, migrants coming into this country of late, and certainly with the past administration. So, you know, I'm not saying that, you know, as a country, you know, being in the United States, that we're exempt from responsibility to take much better care of children, no matter where they're coming from. Thank you, Mr. Vikram.
So as we heard, the situation is very concerning, and I think many people should be involved in this topic and conflict, and should try to find ways to help. We heard what was the situation with the children in Cameroon, as Mr. Tuka described it. It is a nightmare. Children doesn't have schools where to go. Their childhood is ruined. Their future might be ruined. I'm afraid to think of it even. And for me, as a person and a humanitarian working with youth, I know how important it is that children have a steady basis over which they can develop their personalities. We here benefit from their energy and from their wish to change the world for the better. But when we hear now how horrible is the situation, horrific is the situation in Cameroon, and specifically talking about children there, it would be unthinkable for them to start giving to others. They are in a horrible situation, and they have to be rescued, in my view. So this conversation is I find as a global call for action. Many times we spoke, it's a feeling about his nation and the people there, but I'm sure that he'll be the same person towards children in other countries. I'm deeply concerned, and my heart is with the children there, with him, and I advise people to educate themselves on the topic and find ways to help. There are many videos that can be seen on internet, and they show how hard the situation in Cameroon is. So I deeply hope that there is a bright light coming to Cameroon, and it will come very soon.
Thank you, Vikram. And, final remarks from you, Mr. Tuka. And, if you could just give us a sense of hope that you still have for your country.
Yeah, I'm a Cameroonian, and I love my country. I grew up in peace, and I'm longing and praying for those days to come back. When I start seeing the country dividing and people dying, it is not pleasant. I saw and I witnessed a woman crying after the burial of her daughter, who was shot in a school in Kumba. And that woman made a statement, and it was clear after government came up with some money to support those who lost their children. This woman said, I am not happy with what amount given to me. What I want is to have a child. Look at her to the face and smile without money. That is what I want to see happen in Cameroon. I want to see Cameroonians live in peace. Cameroonians, as far as I know, in the 80s, were living well. They were not fond of going to US borderline in search of possibilities to get to the US. They were not flogging the island in Greece to get to Europe. Cameroonians will be sent abroad to Canada, to the US, to Britain, to France to study, and immediately they are finished with their studies, they are longing to come back home. What has happened to those days? I'm talking conscience. I want to leave politics to politicians. And I'm calling on those politicians in Cameroon and those longing for power, be it on the part of the separatist fighters, be it on the government, to consider human life and build a great nation. Many people went into loans, and at the end of the day, they are not able to pay the banks. Many people build houses back at home, and they have been sent out, forced out to live under bridges in bushes. And they will die emotionally. That is worse than this conflict that is going. That's another conflict if this is not handled. So I'm not praying for that. I'm praying for this to happen fast, for peace to return. Peace that will address emotions, peace that will address selfishness, peace that will build people who are ready to build a nation, peace that will not compromise. Thank you, Doctor. Thank you.